So good morning and welcome. My name is Lauren Kramer and I work here at OSU Extension. And OSU is proud to offer this program in partnership with the Oregon Family and Community Education Study Groups. We'd like to thank Joanne Eel, who's right here up front, for spearheading the development of this program. FCE, or Family and Community Education, has been meeting in this community for over 50 years. And they get together once a month for the last 50 years to have ongoing and continuing education. And this is an example of one of the topics that they select in June each year. They get together and decide what they want to learn about in the coming year. And this was one of the things that came up for the group as an important issue to address, to raise awareness in the community and have a good conversation about it. So Joanne, along with the Family and Community Education Study Group team, put together this great panel, and we are really excited that we were able to open it up to the broader community. While each of the topics that our Family and Community Education Study Groups are very important, they've gone over everything from foot and skin care to gardening to healthy eating to spices and teas. Today's topic definitely strikes a chord, and we see that in the media. I'm sure that just about everyone is aware of the Ray Rice and Janae Palmer issue that happened and saw different coverage of that. That resulted in different Twitter handles like #WhyIStayed, #WhyILeft, and a lot of that's been covered in the media. And when that happens, I think it raises a lot of mixed emotions and questions from the community, and I just want to address the fact that those images and that media can result in really visceral reactions for a lot of people. And often leaves viewers with questions about why women and sometimes men stay in those types of relationships. But because domestic violence and sexual assault affect at least 1 in 4 women, there's a very, very good chance that in this room we've got survivors of domestic violence. So we need to be aware of that and honor those experiences. And I also want to make sure that we know that there's probably, in addition to those survivors, people who have been affected by it, know someone, know a family member or relative. So it is a touchy topic, and we just want to make sure we're approaching it and addressing it as such. The last thing I want to just mention is if today brings up issues for you, any sorts of issues, I would encourage you to talk with the panelists more. I would encourage you to talk to counselors or other folks in the community, reach out and talk to someone to help address those issues if they come up. We also included the phone number for the domestic violence hotline. It's a 24/7 hotline on the program, and I'm happy to read that again. It's 1-800-799-7233. And also the website, thehotline.org, is where you can find that information as well. So thanks for listening to that. Each panelist this morning will have 10 minutes to introduce themselves. They've assured me I won't have to cut them off, so we'll hope for that. And they're going to provide some background on how their agency or office works to address or respond or prevent domestic violence and sexual assault. So after that 10 minutes, we'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So be thinking about things that you want to ask the panelists either as a whole or individually. And if the room needs some warming up, I have some prepared questions too. So I'd first like to introduce Lori Rosebraugh. She is with the Oregon State Police Dalles office, and she is a detective. So she's going to present, and then following Lori will be Gloria Needham. Gloria, let me find all my stats about these folks, is the director of the Victims Assistance Program at the Hood River County District Attorney's Office. Next to Gloria is Barbara Riley. She works for the Department of Human Services and is the Community Resource Coordinator for our 5-county region, including Wasco, Sherman, Gillum, Wheeler, and Hood River counties. Next to her is Stephanie Irving. Stephanie is the Executive Director of Helping Hands Against Violence. And last but not least is Serra Perino, and she's the lead advocate for Helping Hands Against Violence. So we'll hear from each of them for their 10-minute explanation, and then, as I said, we'll go into questions. So thanks for being here, everyone.
Good morning. My name is Lori Rosebraugh. Like Lauren said, I'm the detective with the Oregon State Police Station in the Dalles, and I'm assigned to the Major Crimes Section. Just a little bit about my history. I've been employed by state police since January of 1997. And in the summer of 2000, I actually ended up with a position investigating child sex abuse for Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman counties. So I did that for about 3 years, just exclusively sex abuse. And it was all of the cases that involved like younger child victims, not usually the local agencies kept the cases that were teenagers that were maybe in consensual relationships with somebody that might be inappropriate because they were 4 or 5 years old or something like that. So I ended up with all the little kid cases. And that was before we had a child advocacy center in Hood River. So I was partnering at that point with the Department of Human Services Child Welfare Division, and we were doing our own interviews of kids at that point. And then we had some budget cuts in the state of Oregon, so I went back to patrol for a while, and then in the fall of 2003, I ended up with this major crimes position. So now I end up on kind of different investigations, mostly all on the eastern side of the state, homicides, rapes, robberies, public officials that need to be investigated, things like that. So I kind of have a little bit broader caseload now. My portion of responding to assault is I'm always available. My phone is always on. Very rarely I'll go off call for a night or a holiday party or something like that. But I'm always available to the local agencies, and a good portion of my cases end up being agency assists to our local agencies. And a lot of that is because some of our counties are more rural, like Sherman, Gillum, and Wheeler counties, where they don't have a detective assigned to major crimes that has extensive training in sexual assaults or child abuse and things like that. So sometimes I get calls in the middle of the night just from other officers that are wanting to talk about a case that they just took in and they just want some advice. Sometimes they want me to respond to the hospital with them. Sometimes it's a case from a different county that ends up at the hospital, either in Hood River or Wasco County. And because it's multi-jurisdictional or whatever, I get called to that. So usually what happens is somebody ends up at the ER, sometimes before law enforcement's notified. And usually the hospital is really good about notifying either Helping Hands or Haven in the Dalles, and they send an advocate to the hospital right away. And usually then law enforcement also gets notified, and one of us responds to the hospital. Depending on the case and the circumstances, there will be sometimes a couple of us responding, like maybe if it's something that happened in the city, a city officer and myself will respond, because the city has one detective assigned also for working criminal investigations. The county has 2 investigators that are assigned for working investigations. So if it's something that happened out in the county, sometimes both of the county guys will go and they won't need me. Sometimes if one of them's not available, they'll call me. Anyhow, we end up at the hospital and really have to take our cue off of the victim and what they're willing to talk about at that point, what they're not willing to talk about. They always have the right to have an advocate with them. And sometimes there's victims that don't really care who they talk to about what happened because they just want to tell their story. Sometimes people are more self-conscious and only want to talk to a female. So sometimes those are the cases that I get. Then after we've talked with the victim, usually the medical staff we're kind of all working together. There's lots of things going on at the same time, and we really try hard to minimize the amount of time that they have to be sitting in the ER, because just like a victim of a sexual assault, it doesn't necessarily take priority in there over anybody else that's waiting. So the ER visits can take hours sometimes. And especially when it involves younger kids or teenagers, we really try and expedite that. So then we start our investigation aspect, and we work together and hopefully work with the victim to try and get the best possible outcome and to try and build the best possible case, get the best idea of what happened, so that it can either be prosecuted or not prosecuted, just depending on the circumstances. And there's lots of things that we do to try and make that the easiest avenue, I guess, for the victims, so that they don't have to, or we can minimize, I should say, they don't have to, but that we can minimize the possibility for them to have to go to a trial, for instance. So if we do like a really good job and a really good investigation and we get really good statements and evidence and an interview with the suspect, then that really minimizes the chances of going to trial, which is better for everybody. So usually kind of towards the end of our contact with the victim, we give them Gloria's information because she's really the one that ends up being kind of the point guard for the DA's office with our people that we talk to. So that is, I guess, kind of my job and my avenue. I think just want to throw out there that probably the thing I see as being the biggest roadblock for us right now is reporting, and especially I think we're really missing out on a lot of teenagers reporting sexual assault in their relationships. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why they don't report. And to be honest, I can't blame them because it's brutal if you're a teenager and you're attending the high school anywhere and you report a sexual assault because people either, side with you or side with the offender. And it can be brutal and it can be ostracizing, and relationships are complicated and it's not always crazy forcible contact. It can be pretty passive or manipulative or emotional. And I had a horrible case over in Wasco County where the girl ended up not being able to attend the high school there, and she ended up actually coming down here to go to school, which was a much better avenue for her, and she's having a really successful time now. But she felt like she didn't have any other opportunities. And we were fortunate to brainstorm and come up with a plan on that. And so that's part of what we do as we work through the process. It's not like I do the investigation and then just dump them. I really feel like I am there for my victim. And what I tell them is I will be the bulldog. So if somebody starts pressuring you to recant or to influence you, or Facebook is a nightmare sometimes, to let me know and I will address it, because sometimes people start putting stuff out there that is not truthful information. They don't have any firsthand knowledge. They're just talking about what they believe of the allegations. So I contact them and ask them what they know about it, because clearly they are presenting as maybe they have some firsthand knowledge, and that usually kind of nips it in the bud and shuts them right up. So anyhow, that's what's worked for me quite well, and usually it stops some of the bullying, because that's kind of what happens is a lot of times with our younger victims, it turns into a bullying environment and makes it really hard for them to go back to school and such. So that's my gig. Did I go over?
Hi, my name is Gloria Needham, and I am the Hood River County District Attorney's Victims Assistance Director. I'm the entire program. We live in a small county. And I can tell you that the bulk of the work that I do is with victims of domestic violence, some that are not necessarily listed in a police report, but definitely, victims that are self-identifying and coming to the office to ask questions, or because someone has given, the name of our office or my name as a person to just come and have contact with and get more information. The bulk of my job description at the DA's office is to work with crime victims. So specifically, someone that's been identified in a police report or a DHS report, which also, they cross-report with law enforcement, and help them work through the criminal justice system, understanding it, all of the different steps and paces that need to occur as their case is being prosecuted, and not all cases are prosecuted. So helping folks understand the ins and outs, or what happens in the decision making of a case that or a report that's not brought to prosecution. The work that I do is not possible without all of these people here in this table sitting next to me, and also the work that you do as a community in referring or talking to folks, to get to talking to someone, to come and seek out information and in turn hopefully get the resources that the individual needs. Victims' rights is a big issue. In the past, the offender has always been someone that had lots of rights, and everyone had to be very careful. The detectives, everyone as far as law enforcement and others that were involved in getting the information to the prosecutor's office, it is very important. It's critical that everything is done in a meticulous and well thought out and reported way, written reports, because that helps not only the person being prosecuted, but the investigation and the victim or victims that are involved in the incident. I also work very closely with the Children's Advocacy Center because sometimes when we have victims that are being interviewed at the Children's Advocacy Center, there are situations where abuse has been suspected, but it may not lead to prosecution again. And so the idea with that is victims assistance is there to provide support not only to the child, but also to the family, whether or not something happens with the court. And so we're working really hard with not only the initial support at the time of reporting or interviewing, but also afterwards, because it's very, very difficult, I think, for families to kind of be left hanging, not knowing what happens next. And it's a work in process where, at least I'm doing my part in trying to do better. Also, a lot of referrals to DHS, child welfare, self-sufficiency, referrals to other agencies like Helping Hands, Haven, even the Extension Office at times as well. Folks in our community are, I think, more aware now of the services, but I agree with Lori Rosebraugh. I think there's a lot of underreporting at the high school or at the other schools as well, not just the high school, but I think especially the high school. One other thing that I think I failed to mention is that I'm bilingual, and so I think there's just been a lot more awareness within the Hispanic community. I know I've received a lot more referrals from you folks and others when it comes to folks that, where Spanish is their primary language. And I guess I thank all of you for being here. I mean, sometimes it feels like the work that we do is, or the presentations that we make is where you're kind of preaching to the choir. So it's nice to see new faces and folks that are here that are interested in finding out more about who we are and the work that we do and the people that we're trying to reach, because it is important work and we're all part of it. We need to work together. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Barb Riley, and I work for the Department of Human Services Self-Sufficiency. And we're under the same umbrella as child welfare, I'm not representing child welfare today. So a lot of times that in itself can be a little bit of a problem for folks, because we are talked as DHS. When you say DHS, most people worry about child welfare, and I think that's one of the reasons that reporting doesn't happen as often as we'd like, because that's a fearful situation, and there are a lot of rumors that transpire out on the street, and so that's something I'm here to set aside. I am a mandatory reporter, but it doesn't that doesn't mean I'm child welfare. So I'm not going to take your children if you come and get help from us, okay? In fact, I'm going to do everything I can to try to keep the families together, the children with the non-abuser, and that is the goal of child welfare today, as I understand it as well. So we are prevention. We have what's called the SNAP program. Some people may still recognize that as the food stamp program, SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, I think is what it is. So I've been around long enough to still have to break the habit of saying food stamps. We also have the employment-related daycare program where people are working, and we help to pay part of the daycare. We have the TANF program, which is the financial assistance side of the program, as well as the jobs program. So that helps people become more self-sufficient. One of the myths out there too is that you have to be eligible for those programs in order to be eligible for domestic violence assistance. And I want to dispel that myth, because anyone can apply and anyone might be eligible. There are because we take safety so seriously, there are exemptions for that program that are not found in any of the other programs. For instance, most people think you have to have children in order to be eligible for the domestic violence program. That can be waived if you are pregnant. A lot of people think that you have to be a citizen. That can be waived if you're in domestic violence. So we really take the safety of our people seriously. The children don't have to necessarily be with you at the moment. That's another thing that some people think, well, I left my child with my sister and it's just till I get stable, so we can work around that. So the big message is, don't do eligibility on the street. Please send them to us. Let us do the eligibility, okay? Because our job is to find them eligible if we can. Okay, not to bend or break rules, but to find them eligible if we can. We want well-being for everyone. So I'm going to walk you through just the steps of what might happen if you walked in my office today. The immediate safety assessment's done at the front desk. One of the first things we're going to do is try to figure out if you're safe at the moment, and are you safe for tonight. You may not feel safe in our lobby. We want to know that. So we have questions that we've skilled our front desk with, hopefully to try to get to that question pretty quickly. We're going to establish an immediate contact with an advocate if possible. That's always determined by the survivor's wishes. We don't push an advocate on anyone, but we do encourage it strongly. We determine that the customer's safe in the lobby or overnight. We offer a place for them to fill out the application that's not right in the lobby. You might understand that it could be visible that the person had been abused, and you wouldn't want to sit in a lobby where everyone was looking at you and wondering how you got your black eye. We want to make people as comfortable as possible. We offer the time to complete the application. We set an appointment the same day or the next working day, just as quickly as we can. At that appointment, an eligibility decision is made. If eligible, we issue financial and food benefits. The advocate is invited to come to the intake with the customer. I always like it best if the advocate has had time to work with the survivor at least a little while before they come into the office, but we don't always have that privilege. Sometimes they're meeting them for the first time when they come to our intake. So they're very skilled and very comfortable, very good at making people feel comfortable, but still, people don't want to tell everything all the time first time they meet you. And like Lori said, there are people that will tell you everything the first time they meet you, so because they need to get it out. Let's see, we provide a small meeting room for the advocate to meet with the customers, because there's a lot of things they want to tell people that I don't need to know. And there are things that they need, it's better for them to talk it out with someone who's not a mandatory reporter for a little bit to figure out where their best angle is. Customer makes the decision regarding her ongoing safety and self-sufficiency with the help of the advocate if it's accepted. I want to say right there, because I use the pronoun or the her, we do have male victims, and that is underreported. And we do serve male victims, as do the advocates. The customer finds housing and reports to us. So we don't have any housing out back that we can put them in. There's not any pull there, not so much that we can just say, oh yeah, we have a house right up the street. What we do is the financial side of things. We do have some advice and some help, but thank God we have the advocates today, because a long time ago we helped to do all that legwork, and you can imagine the time that's involved in that. We really need our advocates. The self-sufficiency worker and customer negotiate what payments can and will be done and by whom. Self-sufficiency may broker for other assistance from other community partners. We have up to $1,200 to help someone get into different housing or get away from the abuser. We may be moving them somewhere where they have family. We may be sending them on an airplane or a bus or a train. So we may be helping to pay for a U-Haul trailer. We may be helping to pay for gas because the dad's going to come and get them. There's various things, and we put together, sometimes we have to do really creative things. Helping Hands and Haven have a credit card. Sometimes we're able to negotiate with them to make payments that we're not able to make quick enough, and then we do other things to make sure the compensation is happening there. So self-sufficiency maybe we can contact CAP and work together with a community action program to help them know that we have a survivor here, or maybe we help them get onto the special list with HUD. There's just various things we can do. We can find out what's needed to get the utilities in their name. There's lots of power and control that happens in those homes. Payments are made for the services needed, and we generally make those payments to the vendor. So if it's to the landlord, we're going to contact the landlord and make sure we've got the payment history, the address right, that kind of thing. If we are unable to determine the eligibility right away, services are brokered within the community as appropriate to assure safety concerns are met, as well as immediate basic needs. We make every effort to be of support emotionally as well. Sometimes there are clients we can't help. The need is bigger than we can serve, or no matter what we do or find, they're not eligible for our program. But that doesn't mean we can't help. It doesn't mean we can't reach out to the community and find help. One of the most recent cases I can remember was a very young person under 25 with a 2-month-old in July, 100-degree temperatures, living in a truck on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. So those are challenges, but when we pick up the phone and call our partners, and within an hour I have an advocate, I have diapers, and I have wipes, and I have a can of formula, and all of those things, then that person goes away feeling like someone cares, and there is hope, and there is help. On our website, we define domestic violence as it's threatening, abusive, or violent behavior in the home between adults. Dating or relationship violence means that this behavior is directed by one person towards another in a dating relationship. Intimate partner violence versus domestic violence. In general, these terms mean about the same thing. Intimate partner violence is used to describe abuse between current or former partners. Domestic violence can include abuse from a household member, including roommates or caretakers. Intimate partners, including dating partners, or a family member, whether or not they live with the victim. So one of the myths is that it has to be your boyfriend or your husband that is abusing you, and that's not true. I could be living in the house with my aunt and my uncle would be the one abusing me, then I might be eligible for domestic violence. Income is another thing that people think I wouldn't be eligible because I make too much money. That's not necessarily true. We determine eligibility based on what you have today, right now, to meet the need you have. So if you come in on the day that you're paid, we're going to look at as though you have that money. But it depends on how you've used that money. Have you used the money to flee the victim, the perpetrator? Does the perpetrator have control of that money and you don't? There are a lot of things to look at, so please don't let people not come in because of that reason. Emotional abuse, I think, is one of the things that we are still working just as hard as we can. We've come so far with this program and in our communities, and I'm happy that there's language in the law that helps to protect and to prosecute and to understand. However, we still have a long way to go when it comes to the non-physical abuse. So I'm always wanting to bring that to the table because we do. We want, every time we meet this bar, we raise the bar. And so we want to do that. We want to serve people that are in those situations as well, because our children are being affected greatly by the nonverbal abuse that's going on in the home, and actually makes them more likely to end up in abuse themselves later on and various other situations. So just as it is important to recognize how far we've come, I've been with the state for 22 years, and when I first started, we had $300 to work with for domestic violence. And even though there's been, the cost of living has gone up, I assure you $300 didn't meet the need back then. And it doesn't, the $1,200 doesn't always meet the need now. And we have, here's a person who has been in power control in my office across the desk from me, and many times that power and control has been about money, and I'm going to have to hold power and control over that money. It doesn't feel really good to have to kind of nickel and dime, but we do everything we do to try to help the survivor be more stable when they do leave the abuser. So I think that's all my notes and the things that I have for.
I'm Stephanie Irving. I'm the director of Helping Hands. Helping Hands Against Violence is a nonprofit organization located here in Hood River, and we support victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking through both shelter, advocacy, and education. We've actually been around for, I think, since about before the mid-'80s, but it was started by a woman who actually started taking domestic violence victims into homes, and she would find safe homes around the neighborhood. In the mid-'80s, we were able to purchase a home, and then we were able to create a shelter for victims. We actually have two places. One is a 30-day shelter. The average stay, although it's intended as a 30-day shelter, usually it takes about 30 days for some of the families that come to our shelter just to breathe again and feel safe. So we do extend it for various reasons. And I believe the average stay there is now about 4 or 5 months. We also have another building that's a transitional housing, usually a year-long stay for families that aren't quite ready to be out on their own, or don't have enough funding to rent their own place, or haven't found a job yet. And so we provide some transitional housing for some families. We provide a 24/7 hotline, and you can call anytime. And what else? We're one of the few shelters in the country that is also a certified pet shelter. There's a staggering statistic. About 48% of DV victims do not leave their situation because of their pet. So we have a little pet shelter out back. You can bring your dog or cat or what, and that's just a nice incentive to come. And we have on staff, we have 2 advocates. Sarah is one of them, and Karen is another, who serve the victims of domestic violence. We have 6 rooms in our 30-day shelter, each family, 1 room per family, so we can house up to about 19 people in our shelter. We have a communal living kitchen area. Excuse me. A family can walk into our home with really nothing. They can have a toothbrush. No, we'll even provide a toothbrush. We provide everything: the bedding, the shampoo, clothes if they need them, food. Most of the everything is donated into our shelter, but so you can walk out of your house in the middle of the night or whenever you need to, and we will take care of you. We have an amazing community here. I think it sounds like there were some donations that were donated today that come out of the woodwork for our clients. Let's see. Last year alone, we have staff of 3 at Helping Hands. Last year alone, we provided 4,036 safe nights for women and children. We answered 135 crisis calls. We provided 2,928 follow-ups with survivors, assisted 19 women in the emergency room, and created safety plans for 158. It's kind of humbling and staggering what we do sometimes, but when a woman walks into our shelter, having just fled a domestic violence situation, when they leave 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, on their own 2 feet in search of a independent and violent-free life, it makes us realize that the work that we do is vital and important. In addition, our advocates work with all these agencies to help steer the women onto the next step. And they also work with a number of people that come into our shelter that might not need a shelter, but they just want to talk to an advocate. They want to know what are their next steps. They might not be quite yet ready to talk to DHS or even the police, but they'll come to us for completely confidential. We are not mandatory reporters. Some people just want to come and talk. All of our services are free, and but sometimes we are the step that then can point them to the next steps that they need to do. File the restraining orders, talking to the police, talking to DHS. What are their options? We serve a lot of women who don't actually live in our shelter too, that just need our services. Serra is one of our advocates, and she'll tell you about what she does on a day-to-day basis.
Hi, I'm Serra. She pretty much covered everything that we do, but as an advocate, we work with so many people that come in and just have questions about what we do, what are some ideas of what would happen if they leave. Generally, what I feel like we do a lot is just taking everybody that we work with day by day, step by step. We kind of go into our own routine of what we do every day, but it seems like a lot of the times we work with our women that just don't know how to put that first step forward. And that's what I think I spend the bulk of my day doing, is just gently guiding everybody to where they need to be. And sometimes that is just, how do I get up every morning and not cry? Or how do I get in contact, and what's going to happen when I meet with Barb, what's going to happen when I meet with Gloria, and that's a step-by-step basis. I think it is really important, the job that we do, because I think that I just think that it's just important, because I think this is such a big issue that a lot of people just really don't recognize, and I think a lot of people don't recognize it within their own lives. And I think that it's really important that we're here to share and show that there is forward progress, there is movement, and there is hope. I myself was in an abusive relationship from 15 to 30. And during that entire time, I don't know if I was just naive or had my head under a rock, but I didn't realize that kind of thing happened to other people, that there was other people in the world that experienced that, there was help. And so now, as an advocate myself, I love to be able to share and show that there is progress, there is hope, there is a forward future, and I think it's just really important. That's all.
So question number 1 is, what % of referrals lead to prosecution?
I don't know. I don't know if I have a percentage, but it just kind of depends on the referrals. I mean, I get referrals that come to my office, but in the conversation that I have with the individual, if I feel, based on my experience, I've been at the DA's office for 16 years, if based on my experience I feel that it is something that could be and perhaps should be reported, if it's obviously if it's an adult person, I give them that option of inviting an officer to come up to where we are and take a report. The decision lies with the DA. And so again, it goes back to, you know, good investigation, good report. All of the elements have to be there. And if all of that is there and a crime has been committed, then a case will be opened. And believe it or not, sometimes cases are open where the victim is not in agreement either. But if law enforcement has been called and the elements are there, a case will be open. In our office, we have a no-drop policy. So once the wheels of justice are started, again, whether or not the victim is in agreement, the case goes forward. Percentage, I have no idea.
I don't know what the percentage would be. It's interesting just to hear the number of referrals that are talking with Helping Hands. And obviously they talk with a lot more people than actually talk with law enforcement. And some of that is just, it's weeding out, you know, I think if there's things that are definitely prosecutable, that they kind of encourage people, you know, to down that road, but it really is victim centered. So if they're talking with advocates and they really don't want to go down the road of a prosecution, they're not required to report. They don't force people to come to law enforcement, and maybe that's the best road, best avenue for that individual. And none of us are in a position to be able to make any kind of judgment on what decision they make. They need to do what's best for them and what's going to be best for their family. And obviously, I love the idea of people that hurt other people being prosecuted. I love that, you know, and I love the idea of people that have sexually assaulted people. I love the idea of those people going to prison, actually. That like warms my heart, really. And but that's not always the case. That's not what happens. And there's a huge, kind of this huge spectrum also of people that are the offenders. You know, some of the offenders that I deal with are teenagers. You know, I've got, you know, 15, 16-year-old boys that are sexual assault offenders. And do I think that those guys deserve to be in prison? Probably not. I mean, I guess it depends on the circumstances, but do they definitely need like some really good therapy and some really good environment to hopefully modify their behavior so that they don't turn into grown men that are assaulting women? Absolutely. So, I mean, I think we try and be understanding and work collaboratively to have the best outcome. And even if I really want somebody to be prosecuted and to be in the clink, doesn't mean that that's where they're going to end up. And there's times when, obviously I'm a mandatory reporter as well when it comes to child abuse, but there's a lot of times that people call me or come into the office and they just want to know what their options are. And I give out Haven or Helping Hands information like it's candy, because there's all kinds of resources available in our communities. And a lot of people have like zero idea what's out there for them and what's available, and that there's tons of people that are willing to help. They just don't know who those people are. So sometimes my job is not to throw anybody in jail, to put handcuffs on them, is just to connect somebody with the right connections to make sure that they're getting the help they need.
There's a humbling statistic that it takes 9 times for a woman to finally walk out of their home. And so we get all 9 of those calls before they end up in the, we're calling the sheriff. And a lot of times, so we have this 24/7 hotline. Some of the callers, we know them by their first name. They call us regularly. It's humbling. But they haven't stepped in our office yet. And they haven't called the sheriff yet. And they call us every Sunday night. And it's really sad. But we can talk to them. We can listen to them. We can encourage them to come into our office at some point. We can encourage them to go to the police. And they're only going to do it when they're ready. And that's the humbling statistic, is that it takes an average of 9 times for them to walk through that door. And that's why I think the numbers are so different, because we may be we might have we might log 10 calls with the same person or 25 calls with the same person. But
I was going to say, add really quick, one of the things that we do have available that kind of, I think, figures into a little bit of that statistic, it's not really a reporting versus prosecution, but people do have the ability to make a report at the hospital and have a sexual assault kit collected without actually reporting anything to police at that time. And then that kit is maintained for a period of time. And if they decide at a later date that they are interested in speaking with law enforcement and reporting the assault, then they're capable of doing that. So that's kind of an avenue as well that people aren't always aware of. They think, you know, if they go and have a kit collected, that automatically the cops are coming, and that's not necessarily the case.
And also, irregardless of whether there's prosecution or not, the person has the option of developing a safety plan with the advocates or filing for a temporary restraining order through, you know, the Victims Assistance Program, so that there are other safety mechanisms that are set in place or can be set in place for the person to at least get some sort of protection.
That's fine.
So the question is whether or how advocates can not be mandatory reporters if children are in danger. So it sounds like there's a few people on the panel that if they get the call, they need to start the wheels of justice moving. But you all could receive a call from a woman 2, 3, 8, 25 times, but may not need to report that to someone.
Is their child that's being a victim, or is it a
Well,
child
maybe
that's
just
calling?
how are folks not a mandatory reporter if anyone is in danger, whether it's themselves or a child? But this question specifically asks about a child.
I think it's important for us not to be mandatory reporters, because then it opens that avenue to be fully honest and just share whatever's going on in your life. And then what I think our responsibility is to also give them the information of who is out there that can help. So I think it leaves that ability for the client to be fully honest about what is going on in their life. And sometimes that is healing in itself, to be able to share everything that's on their shoulders. And then I think it's what we would do is just do a warm handoff to somebody that can help, or give them as much information and positiveness of what would be the best option for them. I hope that answers.
I know a lot of people in the room are probably mandatory reporters, so that's a good clarifying question. Another question is, can teens or anyone really report confidentiality, or can teens report confidentially? How would high school peers find out? So maybe returning back to that question of bullying and how that comes up.
Nothing is confidential in high school. The reality is that, for instance, if a teen reports a sexual assault, it doesn't get, for instance, it doesn't get reported to the media or anything like that by law enforcement or by the DA's office. Their names are withheld from like the police log, so it's not going to be in the newspaper or anything. But as soon as, they're identified as a victim. When any kind of a court proceeding then happens, their name is in court, and that's all open to the public. And the other thing is, you can do so much to guard that, but the reality is if I'm reporting something and Gloria is my best girlfriend, I probably told Gloria, and Gloria, being another high school girl, is drama filled as well, and feels like she wants to tell her boyfriend or something, and then all of a sudden somebody knows somebody else, and pretty soon people know about it. And so a lot of times what I do is I really encourage people that are reporting something like that to me to keep it close to their chest, to keep it in their family, tell like the people that are supportive of them, that love them, to lean on them. If they have a best friend that they're confident is not going to go and talk about things and they feel okay about that, then they can talk about it. But as soon as you start talking to other people, it's like the telephone game. Pretty soon a lot of people know. And then, thinking back to this other case, as soon as I went and arrested this young fella at work, then everybody knew. And then he had a problem with following his release conditions. So he gets out of jail and then violates his release conditions. So I go arrest him again. And that makes everybody all upset again, because here I am arresting their buddy. And then he stays in jail, and I find out how prevalent he had been violating his release conditions. anyhow, it just is like wildfire. So it's not that their names are broadcast, you know, in the newspaper or anything like that. Even if I take a juvenile offender into custody, their name doesn't go in the newspaper as far as them having been arrested, but people find out. They tell somebody's with them when I arrest them, whatever. People find out, and everybody's speculating what's going on. Why did so and so get arrested? So we can work really hard to try and kind of keep that circle small. Sometimes that's successful, sometimes it's not. Obviously, if it's a stranger or an acquaintance or an adult family member that has offended somebody, it's way easier. But it's really hard if you've got a victim and an offender that are attending the same school together. It's a nightmare, basically, then.
Can some of you speak to the question of how prevalent domestic violence and sexual assault are in the community? I think when it does seem hidden, it's hard to know how big of a problem it is. So I don't know how easy that question is to answer, but...
Well, I'll answer a part of it, but actually, as a shelter, most of our clients are actually not from Hood River County. And that's because they're fleeing from somewhere, coming to somewhere that's safe. We get a lot of referrals from Portland, because we're only an hour away, Klickitat County, Wasco County. So they're coming to our county to be safe. That doesn't mean there's no domestic violence in Hood River County. There's plenty of it here too. I think a lot of the calls that we get, especially the hotline calls, are here because we know they're locals. Sometimes just by the conversation. But I think the clients that we serve, a lot of them are not, a high percentage of them are not from here, because I think they're being served elsewhere. But so I don't actually know county stats. But
I think from my perspective with the work that I do, I would say at least 50% of the work that I do in my office is working with victims of either domestic violence and some sort of sexual assault. Sometimes it's both and sometimes it's one or the other. So that's a lot of people. We have about 800 cases that are actually filed and open in our county every year. I think that's been the average, at least it was this year again. So again, even though the bulk of the cases that we have in our county are not domestic violence cases, there are still a lot of folks that come into the office to seek out information, referrals back and forth from Helping Hands, from DHS Child Welfare, from folks in the community. People are coming in and seeking services. They're needing protection orders. Through the temporary restraining order, victims of violence can receive temporary custody. That's a big issue for a lot of families. Parents that don't want to leave their abuser because they've been threatened that their children will be taken away from them, that either the offender will keep them, or that somehow the fabulous DHS folks that are always thrown under the bus as the folks that'll take the children away. And also immigration, where families are threatened that if you report or if you do this, I'm going to call immigration on you. And so those folks are calling or coming in. I know in a 6-month period of time, on average, I receive about 1,300 phone calls in that time period. And again, about half of those are just questions about, what if I do this? What if I get this protection order? Can I get custody? Can I do this? And so, I guess from where I'm sitting, I can tell you there are a lot of folks at least asking the questions about what, domestic violence and what the options might be. And I think last year, I just did the reporting, but after you do reporting, you end up with so many numbers in your head. But I think I had about 330 domestic violence victims through 2 grants.
And there's a federal, state and federal average of 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic violence, and that's the reported number. So, I mean, technically that's what we're looking at. It's also interesting, Gloria mentioned something that I have learned recently, but that if you're an undocumented citizen but you've been a victim of domestic violence, you actually are protected rather than, I think a lot of times people fear that they're going to get thrown out of the country, or if somebody discovers that, but actually the law now protects victims of domestic violence for undocumented citizens.
That's another partnership that we have in the community here through, there are other agencies, but Catholic Charities plays a big part in educating us as advocates and, you know, interested people in the community, in letting victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and actually other crimes as well, but the focus is the domestic violence and sexual assault, where an undocumented victim is able to apply for what's called a U visa, and through that U visa they are able to apply, well, after applying they're able to receive some sort of status where they can legally stay in the country and be protected. And if they have undocumented children, they can also include their children in the petition. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful resource and asset for us as advocates to be able to give that information and that resource to people that we're working with.
And once a victim is in our shelter, we treat them as a local. Well, their kids, we help them enroll in school here. We help them get back onto our normal life right here in Hood River County, and access to all the services that we have. And as Sarah said, a lot of them do stay and become active, involved residents of the community.
Question back to Helping Hands. What kinds of donations are helpful for the shelter? Do you take donations for families who are starting over? And where do you take donations so that there's not a stream of folks just showing up at the shelter?
Right now, pillows. We need pillows. For some reason, all of our pillows have disappeared. So what we need often fluctuates throughout the year. We all things that you use every day, we always need. Shampoo, laundry detergent, toilet paper. If you think about your household needs that you go through every day and multiply it by 6 families, that's what we need every day. We can never have enough of that stuff. We do have a limited amount of storage. We do have storage space, thanks you to Hood River Public Storage. So if you think of the everyday items that you go through every day, we go through that in spades. But bedding, sheets, pillows, we have it, but again, it gets worn and torn and taken eventually, and so we're kind of in constant need of things like that. We get a lot of clothing donations. It doesn't mean we don't need clothing, but we do get a lot of clothing donations. We use them as we can. What we don't use, we have a relationship with Eagle One, and so we actually then donate to Eagle One our surplus, and then have a nice ongoing relationship with them to help serve some of our women that are sizes that we don't get in. What are some other donations that we need? Money. We always need money. You can donate online. HelpingHandsOregon.com. Lately, you know what we mostly need? Services. If you guys know any plumbers that would like to come visit us once in a while, or any handyman that knows how to use a drill and fix a door frame and patch a broken wall. We just had a team of volunteers painting the entire inside of the, we're still not done yet. Painters, if you know any painters, things like that. So our maintenance budget is essentially 0. So we do all on a volunteer basis. We did recently do an outreach over the past year for new flooring, because we had almost 30-year-old rug in our house that was torn, stained, It looked horrible. The rooms were clean, but it looked horrible. We just, if you look at our Facebook page, got new flooring because we spent a year fundraising for that. So yeah, so services are something that we really could use. Helping Hands phone number is 541-386-4808. And trained volunteers in a number of different aspects. We, if you would like to volunteer, call us directly because if you're trained, well, we can train you also for certain things, but there's a lot of things that we just need extra hands at once in a while. Direct contact with our clients, we actually need to, everyone needs to go through a 40-hour training, and that's kind of more cumbersome. But there's a lot of things, yard cleanup, painting donations, or helping us organize some events, that kind of thing that you could do all the time. Yeah.
I have a question related to your answer to the previous question, or a couple of them. And one was, you need toilet paper, you need this and that, I'll bet you need dog food and cat food since you have pets. But would it be easier, given storage space and all, if people just gave you money to get those things? I mean,
yeah, we are extremely frugal with our funds, and they're used, every cent that is donated to us is used in a wise way. We always try to get donations before we, we'd like to find somebody to donate flooring before we actually have to buy flooring, but there's some things that we do have to buy. And yes, funds, exactly, because if there's something that we need and we happen to be running out of toilet paper, we do have to go buy it. And it would be better for, and again, yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of people like giving things because it feels better to get the actual toilet paper, but we promise if you say it's for toilet paper, we will buy it for toilet paper.
And then you mentioned that if you had stuff that you couldn't use, you passed it on to Eagle One. Mm-hmm. That sounds to me like Boy Scouts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Eagle One is a thrift store. It's actually just around the bend, kind of past the bowling alley.
Oh, that is, so it is?
So it is a thrift store. So what we do is we go through and we keep 50% of what we get, and then we'll send the rest up there. And then when there's a time when we have a gal that we just don't have the right size, or it's just what we have on site doesn't work out, she allows them to go shopping there essentially for free. So they can walk out of there with everything they need, because she has a whole store with every kind of size and every kind of need. So, it's a great relationship we have with her.
She's basically our storage closet, so it's worked out really good.
Do you have a Facebook page?
We do have a Facebook page, Helping Hands Against Violence. I believe you'll find it.
And do you put a blast out if you need things, like if you've got a family that's looking for beds or stuff like that? Perfect.
Because often when a family comes to us and they stay with us for a few months, they still have nothing, because we have bedding, we have beds, we have couches and TVs, whatever. But when they leave, they're usually on their own. They haven't been able to get back to their house. They can't take things from their house for various reasons. Or they don't have access to their storage or something. So often when they leave, we're so excited because they've finally gotten funding from DHS, and they've got their rent, or they've gotten a job, and we're so excited, and they go to an apartment and they have nothing. So if we have extra donations of pots and pans, we share that with them. If we can get a bed, we share that with them. If somebody's donated an extra couch, we let them have it. And we keep contact with them for a while. Eventually they disappear off into their own life. But usually for the 6 months or so after they've left us, they're, we know what they need. Yeah, we need a microwave. Recently we had DHS helped us purchase a bunk bed, I think, right?
Yes.
And which was wonderful, but we needed mattresses. So we had somebody donate some mattresses. So things like that are really wonderful.
There's at least one question in the audience. Mike's flagging you down.
Is it okay now?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to mess up your system.
No, you're good.
So I'm Mike Hendricks. I wanted to ask a question. First of all, thanks for doing this. This is just terrific, super. I'm struck, though, by all the talk so far has been about services to victims, and I've had the honor to work with Stephanie and Sarah a little bit on some of that. But nobody's mentioned prevention at all yet, and I'm really struck by that. As I've said to Stephanie in the past, my hope is that eventually her agency dries up and blows away because there's no women needing to come in. That's my hope. Yeah. Not that we serve more women. So can anybody on the panel talk to that? Is anything happening prevention-wise?
Well, I'll just say I agree with you. Prevention would be wonderful. I wish and I hope someday in the near future we have a staff to have a healthy relationship education specialist on staff. Again, with 3, actually it's 2.75. We're just putting out fires. I do also hope someday that we don't exist because there is no need for us. I look around the room. I wish there were more men in the room. You know, there was, NPR had this yesterday morning, I think, about the nomore.com campaign that's going on, and all the football players kind of speaking up about no more violence. That was a great start. Our shelter has cycles. Just, it's kind of strange. Like the emergency room, I guess you can almost tell there's cycles. You know, there's cycles in domestic violence. Summer, people think summer vacation is fun. Unfortunately, we're full all summer long. The Super Bowl's coming up. Unfortunately, we're usually full after the Super Bowl. So it's really powerful to see that more men are speaking up, and it's a start. It's not a women's issue, it's a men's issue. It's both, it's all of us involved. It's how we talk to each other, it's how we incorporate. But I hate to say, unfortunately right now, our shelter isn't doing a lot of prevention because right now we're putting out fires. We've been searching for funding. There are some grants out there. We may get them, and if we can get another advocate on staff or get a few more people on staff at some point, I would love to designate somebody as sort of reaching out there to the schools, to the youth, and kind of teaching people what healthy relationships are, how to talk to people, how to, what a healthy interaction is.
I think prevention also is huge by just breaking the cycle, by allowing people or having people come in. You're just breaking that cycle by showing that there is a different life out there. And also prevention is things like this. People are talking about it, people are acknowledging that it's out there, and I think that people would kind of second guess what's going on in their personal lives, and I think that's prevention in itself.
I think definitely we've come a long way in our communities in the 18 years that I've been working here, as far as seeing more people that are willing to come in and seek assistance. And then some of that is, you know, providing them with ideas or names of counselors and things like that so that they can get help that way, providing, even offering some ideas for services for their abuser. Things like that along the way, which is not necessarily preventing it from ever happening, but it's maybe trying to at least prevent it from continuing. There is, I was going to look up my email, but I decided not to grab my phone out. There is a Healthy Relationships Summit that's happening in the Dalles at the end of the month. I want to say it's the 29th. I'll pull up the email when we're done here today, and if anybody wants any information, get a hold of me. Haven in the Dalles does have a duo that goes out and does prevention work, and they have been out in like Doofer. They're starting to work more in some of the more rural areas, but they are doing a lot of work right now because they were able to secure funding in the schools, prevention. They started at the high school, they're moving it down towards the middle school, and I think they maybe are even starting into the elementary school, but I'm not 100% on that. The summit is available, I think, to pretty much anybody that's interested in how to foster healthy relationships with teens and things like that. So I've got a flyer for it on my email. I could certainly forward it to anybody that would like to give me their email address. I would love to share that information. And I think that's really where we need to be starting, is in our schools, and really getting that information out so that kids know that if something bad is happening in their house, that's not normal, and that just because that happened in their house doesn't mean that they need to be that way, or that they can treat people that way, or things like that, that we need to stop that cycle from happening. And so I think that's really where we need to be focusing a lot of our energy and trying to get the funding so that we can do more work in teaching kids how to be respectful in relationships.
I'd just like to speak to that for a moment, because there is a life skills course that's presented here, well, all over, but it is faith-based, and it is out of the Hood River Covenant Christian Church, and it's called Hood River Family Life Skills. The originator is out of Denver. It is a great program. It's a 30-week program, and it's for men and women separately. We also have a teen group going right now in the Dalles, and Haven does healthy relationship course for anyone, and they would serve males as well. So I think education is definitely a huge part of it, but prevention, as Lori said, we need to start with the youth, and we need to start with, we need to back upstream, or else we'll just keep catching them as they come over the waterfall and building more shelters.
Well, let me just say, it sounds like sadly the answer is not enough is being done on prevention. I just want to say I'm real interested in that issue for lots of reasons. I'm willing to put some time and some of my own money into it. If anybody wants to ever talk about doing that, it seems like there's stuff that could be done in the schools and the churches, the media, businesses. Lots and lots of things could be done, and in my opinion should be done.
I came with 2 resources today. In 1984, I was involved in a large fundraiser for the child abuse prevention for the state of Oregon. I met Robin Carr Morse. It's not any secret that we're pretty much at an epidemic stage here. I mean, with limited funding all over the country, we have all this violence. And Robin has done a lot of research and written a book called Ghosts from the Nursery. We really need to start in infancy, because this is where it all starts. And she has just this month opened 2 parenting institutes in the South that will be resources for parents to understand child development and brain development in infancy. She interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer's mother. She interviewed Ted Kaczynski's siblings. And she has written about those case studies in here, and there are a lot of clues in their infancy and childhood about why these tiny innocent babies grow up to be serial killers and abusive people. It doesn't get anybody off the hook. But if we can prevent at infancy, then we have a better chance as a society to prevent it at the very roots. So the premise of the book is that recent research on brain development suggests that infancy is the stage in which foundations of trust, empathy, conscience, lifelong learning, and thinking are laid down. It demonstrates the poisonous effects that neglect, abuse, trauma, injury, and toxicity have in the first 24 years of life. So I really, if you're interested, this is a wonderful book, and I have it if you want to write it down. She also has a second book called Scared Sick, which is how illnesses in childhood lead to adulthood illnesses later on. So anyway, I just thought I'd put that out, because there is hope, and there is something we need to do, but we really need to do it a lot earlier, according to Robin, than we think. When I first met her in 1984, she showed me a video of a beautiful little 4-year-old girl, big blue eyes, gorgeous blonde hair, and at 4 she had pushed her foster brother down the stairs, and her foster mother woke up one day and the little girl was standing over her with a knife. And they got into that little girl's life, and it's all there, and what happened to her at the age of 4. So they got her out of the home, they got her into intensive therapy, and by 12 years old they figured she was going to be an okay adult. But it's something that has to happen really early. So anyway,
What's the last name of that?
Robin Carr Morse. Karr-Morse. Anyway, I've got some flyers. Oh, and also, wait a minute, I'm sorry. There's another publication, speaking of men, it's called Voice Male, M-A-L-E, Voice Male, and it's and it comes out of I can't remember where Robert runs, but this is a magazine for men on how to be nonviolent, how to support women positively. It's a fabulous, fabulous publication, and I highly recommend you check that out too.
I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Is there, in all of this process, I think that domestic violence or sexual assault is really complicated, and oftentimes I think that sometimes people don't want to leave or don't want to, they really love that person, and maybe that person doesn't know how to deal with their anger or frustration appropriately, is there a channel that when if somebody comes to you and says, but I really love him, can we help him? Or can we help her? Is there an accepted, like a way that you steer them into a get well so that the family can stay intact and get well together? Is that possible, or am I being naive? Do people repair?
People do
Can they?
repair. You can reprogram your brain. You can change. And there is hope and there is help. I'm sure there's more programs than one, but I mentioned the Hood River Family Life Skills, and then there's a batterers course, batterers intervention in the Dalles that I know of. So there is help, and we can direct people to those resources. I personally can say that there's the Hood River Life Skills course. I thought I knew a lot about abuse. And I thought I knew a lot about being a survivor and a victim, but I've learned a whole lot more. It's you never quit learning until you're dead, and so there's always hope as long as we're breathing. We're always changing. We're always striving to do better, and there are programs, and I'd be glad to talk to anyone afterwards.
I think the big thing on that is you would have to have both parties willing to make that change, and I would say a huge majority of the people that we see, that's not the case, unfortunately. Sadly, that's not the case. So usually the dynamics of the domestic violence are that one person is being abused and the other person doesn't see it as it being an issue, and they aren't going to change. Or that they are certainly not going to change because somebody else wants them to change. So they have to be ready to do that, and sometimes I think that doesn't happen until they lose everything, and then they maybe decide because of some kind of a court order that they have to go to the batters intervention training and things like that, be a part of a victim impact panel and stuff like that, that make them have a glimmer of understanding of how their behavior has impacted that other person. So I think obviously in an ideal world, it would be great if we saw a victim and the suspect said, you know what, you're right, I've been hurting you and I'm ready to change, but that's just not what we see.
The suggestion that I make is always to start with you. That the only thing that you can control is you. And, if that's something that you're interested in, go and invite the other person to go as well, but more on the, individual counseling. And then if it ever comes to, a point or, I leave it up to the therapist to decide if it's even healthy for these two to come together for joint sessions. I don't even know if you guys do that anymore, but I know they did when I was going to counseling. So.
And Lori's right. Clearly, a lot of times, especially by the time she's involved, it's already over the waterfall. But all of us, I think we also can recognize the fact that the abusers aren't just all of those people out there. We all have had parts in it. We've all been abusive in our manner in some time or another in our life, and to recognize that we are the only one we can change, and that when we change the dance, the partner we're dancing with is going to have to change their step as well. And sometimes that takes, your foot gets stepped on. It's not always comfortable learning a new dance. But I think that there are homes that the preventive measures can make a huge difference in. And I think it's important to look for those homes and those places and offer the opportunity for them before we need to involve Lori.
Cheryl, we have a minute. Go ahead.
I'll try to use that less than that. First off, thank you for being here and putting on this incredible program. And I too wish that you didn't have a job, that there weren't any problems. And I think prevention is critical. Find out who's thrown those babies in the water before they get over the waterfall. And one way of doing that is not only knowing that you're doing that, but for all of us to donate to these organizations, to volunteer for these organizations, and to bring that dialogue into everywhere we go. Make it more of a topic in the community, because it's here in this tiny, sweet little bird. And we've got to get the education into the schools, we've got to get it into the churches, we've got to get it into our everyday conversations. And thank you for